All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Damon Hernandez. I'm the Tax Program Supervisor 3 with the Department of Taxation. I oversee the licensing and investigation activities for the department. We really appreciate you attending today. Anytime the department can reach out with our application partners and discuss processes, compliance, ways we can work together, we're happy to do that. And I also want this to be considered, if we haven't been in contact with you, just an introduction of the contact. And we would like to continue the contact going forward whenever needed regarding applications or literally anything that the department might be able to answer questions for you guys on. So today we're going to be focusing on Nevada state liquor applications. Prepared a PowerPoint presentation we'll be going through, covering several different topics that are relevant to licensing. As we both know, we kind of partner in the same space regarding licensing, regarding state liquor licensing. Local jurisdictions do the first review and then send that to us, but we're really looking at the same application and licensing decisions for the same applicants. With that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. So Nevada state liquor statutes, we'll kind of start from the beginning. Just wanted to bring these up so we all know where we look to look at compliance and licensing decisions, or just to look at the statutes and regulations. So NRS 369, that's the main liquor statute, covers intoxicating liquor, licensing, and taxes. We have an NAC 369, which is a regulation also on the same topics. Those focus more on reports having to do with the liquor licensing, the liquor licensees, I should say. And then we have NRS 597, which is, the title of that statute is Miscellaneous Trade Regulations and Prohibited Acts. However, that statute is more of like a hodgepodge of a bunch of different statutes for different industries. There's a section called alcoholic beverages, which are reflected on that range of provisions there, 597.120 through 597.255. That's where we'll find the ones specifically pertaining to Nevada liquor statutes. All right, one of the hallmarks of the liquor industry in Nevada is the three-tier system. We're going to do a brief overview of the different license types and where they live within the three-tier system. We'll start off with the tier one. Those are the suppliers, also known as manufacturers. And these include in-state manufacturers such as brew pubs, distilleries, wineries, rectifiers, and designated agents. These in-state licensees are the ones that the local jurisdictions receive applications for and then ultimately forward to the department for final approval. The next two are out-of-state suppliers / manufacturers. We'll talk about those for just a second. So out-of-state, inside the United States, they can get certificates of compliance, and also for designated agents. And then we have out-of-the-country manufacturers who are owners of liquor transported into the United States, or their designated agents. Now, again, those two, the out-of-state and out-of-country, are also out of Nevada. So those are the ones, those two types of suppliers with regard to the certificate of compliance the department deals with specifically. The in-state, again, are the ones that go through local jurisdiction first. And then we have tier two, the importer wholesalers, also known as distributors. The importer wholesalers in Nevada are also in-state licensees, and those are also applications that local jurisdiction receive. And then when those applications are approved, they forward them to the department. And then the third tier of the three-tier system we have are the retailers. Those are the ones who sell to the ultimate consumer. Now, one of the interesting things is, so the main thing is that a business cannot operate in more than one tier of the three-tier system. There are exceptions. There are statutory exceptions that we'll be going through later. Also, the importer wholesalers, they're kind of like the shock absorber in the middle. So the importer wholesaler can purchase from suppliers or they can purchase from other wholesalers. At the same time, they can sell to retailers and they can sell to other wholesalers. But in general, the path of product goes from the manufacturer, the supplier tier, to the importer wholesaler tier, through the retailer tier, and on to the ultimate consumer. A couple items to note that I just mentioned that a licensee can only operate in one tier of the three-tier system. We'll talk about the statutory exceptions. And the licenses all expire on June 30th of each year, and renewals are issued effective July 1st of each year after timely submittal and review of the renewal form and payment. That June 30th expiration date is very important. We communicate that to our applicants. We can work with late submittals on a case-by-case basis or for cause, but at some point, if they do not renew, their license will get canceled, and that will trigger a complete new application process, which, as we all know, could take a long period of time. So we really preach having them renew timely. All right, required state licensing. So all liquor activities require a license in the state, regardless of tier, regardless of license type. Here, we're going to talk about these from a different angle a little bit. So the out-of-state suppliers, we talked about certificate of compliance holders and designated agents. The department handles those applicants. The in-state suppliers, here's a more inclusive list of the in-state suppliers, specifically the manufacturers: wineries, instructional winemaking facilities, breweries, brew pubs, craft distilleries, estate distilleries, rectifiers, and designated agents. As we mentioned, the in-state liquor importer wholesalers are also in-state licensees. So the local jurisdictions should be very familiar with these types of applicants because the in-state must go through local jurisdiction first. Obviously, some license types are more popular or more frequently seen than others. And then lastly, the in-state liquor retailers. The Department of Taxation does not issue retail liquor licenses. That's specifically done by the local jurisdiction. So here's the actual statute regarding the suppliers. I'll go ahead and read that. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but the supplier, this is NRS 369.111, supplier defined. As used in this chapter, supplier means with respect to liquor, which is brewed, distilled, fermented, manufactured, rectified, produced, or bottled outside the United States, the brewer, distiller, manufacturer, producer, rectifier, vintner, or bottler of the liquor, or his or her designated agent, or B, the owner of the liquor when it's first transported into any area under the jurisdiction of the United States government, if the brewer, distiller, manufacturer, rectifier, producer, vintner, or bottler of the liquor, or a designated agent of such person is not designated an importer to import the liquor in the state. And then two, we have within the United States, but outside the state, the brewer, distiller, manufacturer, rectifier, producer, vintner, or bottler of the liquor, or his or her designated agent. Again, the first two involve licensees that are outside of the state that the department deals with the certificate of compliance. The last item has to do within the state, the brewery, brew pub, distillery, craft distillery, manufacturer, rectifier, producer, or bottler of the liquor, or his or her designated agent. So that's the statutory definition of supplier, just for background. All right, so the certificate of compliance application process. These are, again, for out-of-state manufacturers wishing for their product to be sold into Nevada. So we also call it the COC for short. So COC applications are submitted to the department only and are reviewed for approval/denial by the liquor tax examiners and supervisors. Tax examiners consult with supervisors as needed, for the supervisor as needed on complex application situations. During application review, the department commonly requests additional documentation and/or answers to questions. Once the application review is complete, the department will either approve or deny the application and advise the applicant of the result. If the application is approved, the COC will be issued. If denied, the department will refund the application fee. Sorry about that. In-state applications, the in-state application review process. In-state suppliers include brew pubs, distilleries, wineries, rectifiers, and their designated agents. For example, we just looked at a little bit more comprehensive list, but in essence, the in-state manufacturers. Also includes importer wholesalers as in-state applicants. So in-state suppliers and importer wholesaler applications are submitted to the local jurisdiction per NRS 369.190. Applicants typically send the department a courtesy copy at the same time. The courtesy application will be reviewed initially by the department, but an application decision cannot be made by the department until the department receives an approved application from the local jurisdiction pursuant to NRS 370.200. However, the department may reach out to local jurisdiction and/or request additional documentation / explanations from each applicant during the initial review of the application if questions or concerns with the application are identified at the same time. So I want to talk about this part of the process right here a little bit. So as mentioned, the local jurisdiction gets the first, the state application is formally submitted to the local jurisdiction for review, and the local jurisdiction will, each one goes through its own process at arriving at an approval decision or denial, but it's part of the conversation and approval decision. We also get a courtesy copy many times, which is not required, and we're not going to make a decision on it, but it does allow the department to have kind of a preview of the application while the local jurisdiction is reviewing it. And this is an opportunity where actually for local jurisdiction and the state to reach out to each other. For example, if early on in the process, if we get a courtesy copy of an application and we're reviewing it, we see some potential issues or might have some potential questions, including like maybe some 3-tier violation potential issues. We could definitely reach out to the local jurisdiction while they're reviewing the application, while it's under their review, and communicate that. And at that time, it's still early enough in the process where the local jurisdiction can either address that, pose the question, or request additional documentation or information. Same goes for the local jurisdictions. We welcome any of the jurisdictions to reach out if they have questions during the application process on state applications. We're here to help. We're on the same team. And if we can get an issue resolved early, sometimes the application can be revised. Sometimes they could make changes to other parts of their application that we may have potential concerns about, and it can ultimately be approved. But the earlier we get the information to the applicant, the better for all concerned. So that's an opportunity for us to work together as needed in those situations. The process continues, so communication while applications are in review. It's hoped that local jurisdictions would reach out anytime during the application review process if there are questions related to compliance with regard to an application, especially potential 3-tier violations. The same is true for the department, as I just mentioned. Communicating with each other can assist in resolving applications quickly, engender good working relationship between the agencies, and make the application process more efficient and effective for the applicants. So definitely welcome that at any time. All right, upon review of the approved application from local jurisdiction, the department staff will review the application for final approval / disapproval. So again, one of the main things we're looking for are potential 3-tier violations. We'll talk about different ways those show up sometimes and different questions that we can ask that might unravel or reveal some of these potential 3-tier concerns. But it's not just limited to that. We want to make sure that they are not violating the 3-tier system, but they're also in compliance with the department. We'll be talking about that shortly too. So final application review may include, but is not limited to, confirmation of proper approval by local jurisdiction. For example, required signatures and approval of the approval box checked on the application, approval letter, etc. So on that, the department appreciates if there's like a cover letter that comes with the application that's approved by local jurisdiction. It's not required. We do appreciate it though. But what is required is on the application that the approval box is checked and signed by an authorized signer on behalf of the local jurisdiction. And if they have a seal or a stamp, we appreciate that being applied to it. But the minimum we need to have is the approval box checked. Sometimes the applications might have been approved, but that one item is not checked, and we'll just reach back out, and that's easily rectified. But just wanted to mention that because that happens occasionally. A compliance check for any violations of the 3-tier systems or liquor statutes. Contacting local jurisdiction for questions and additional documentation, talked about that, and continuing the application, contacting the applicant for questions or additional documentation also. So we don't just reach out to the local jurisdiction. We may also reach out to the applicant, and anything that we find that's germane to the application review or would help the local jurisdiction during this process, we share that information freely. The department does rely on local jurisdictions' review process to examine whether the applicant is a person of good moral character. That's a statutory requirement. The department does not currently have a process for that. So most local jurisdictions do take care of that as part of their overall process, but we just wanted to make sure that we're all aware that the department does rely on the local jurisdictions' examination of that requirement as part of the application process. All right, conducting a pre-license inspection. No liquor should be on site prior to licensure. If found, liquor could be subject to seizure and the application decision may be effective. Before any license is issued, we do a pre-license inspection. Obviously, suitability and a bunch of other factors are reviewed and approved by local jurisdiction before we get the approved application. But since we're doing a final review, we go ahead and personally check and make sure. The main thing we're looking for is that there's no liquor on site, because if they have a liquor on site during the pre-license inspection, that by default means that they're not licensed, and as such, that product is technically considered contraband. We try and preach this information as much as possible. If local jurisdiction is able to let them know that there will be a pre-license inspection and there should be no liquor on site during that inspection. We have no problem in giving them a heads up. We want them to be in compliance. We want them to get their license without any hiccups. And this is information that they should be aware of anyway. So feel free to communicate that a pre-license inspection will be required before final approval of the application. The department will also check the account of the applicant to determine if the applicant has any outstanding tax debt to the department. If found, the department may refuse to issue or renew any license until the debt is satisfied, pursuant to NRS 360.205. The next slide we'll have the actual statute, so I'll go there and then I'll say a quick word about this. So NRS 360.205, it's the power of the department to deny license, registration, or permit to applicant who is liable to the department. The department may refuse to issue or renew any license, registration, or permit it is authorized to issue pursuant to the provisions of this title. If the application for the license, registration, or permit, one, is delinquent in the payment of any tax or fee administered by the department, has not paid a deficiency determination. Deficiency determination can be an audit or another way that the department determines a tax bill for a taxpayer, or is in default of a payment required pursuant to a written payment agreement with the department, also known as a payment plan, is otherwise liable to the department for the payment of money, including without limitation any penalties, interest owed, or any other obligation to the department. So it's a pretty all-encompassing statute that it appears the legislators wanted to make it clear that any applicant needs to be in compliance with the department, and we do check for that. And when we do find that there's either debt or other tax-related non-compliance issues with the applicant, that will hold up approving the application. Sometimes it's just an amount that needs to be paid. They can take care of that. If it's a larger amount, depending on the situation, the department may approve a payment plan agreement. One thing to note on the payment plan agreements is that a condition of the payment plan agreement is that going forward they remain in compliance with any and all tax filing and payment that they need to make, depending on what licensures they have or what tax types apply to them. Also, it will basically get in the way of any licensing decision that if they owe anything to the department. Let's see the next slide. All right, upon application approval, the applicant will be contacted by the department tax examiner to collect any required bond or outstanding license fees. Once the bond and fees are collected, the department will issue the in-state supplier, importer wholesaler license. When the applicant has received their state license, they're authorized to engage in business under the license type they applied in accordance with the statute. This is very important also. we have a number of applicants that we see where they might obtain the local jurisdiction license. So as we all know, most of the local jurisdictions have their own licensing. And they also have the state licensing, for example, in a liquor scenario. But we run into a lot of situations where once they receive their local jurisdiction license, they believe that they're authorized to start operating, notwithstanding the fact that they do not have their state license, which is the actual license that will allow them to operate. So we definitely preach heavily to the applicants, not for them not to operate until they get their state license. And this is an area where local jurisdiction can also help communicating that to the applicant. I know a lot of local jurisdictions definitely do that, but if a point could be made to let them know that, we can reduce instances where we do that pre-license inspection and they're operating before they get the state license, and it makes it easier for everyone if that information gets out. Thank you. All right. So license types, retail liquor stores. Applications are submitted, reviewed, and approved by the local jurisdiction in which they are applying. The state does not issue retail licenses for liquor. The retail licenses, though they're issued by the local jurisdiction, the retailers still must operate in compliance with NRS 369 and 597. Retail liquor stores are subject to inspection and enforcement action by the department. An example of the enforcement activity that we do during an inspection is normally we'll go in and we'll make sure that the liquor that they have on hand was obtained in a compliant manner, specifically in compliance with the 3-tier system. And that means that the liquor that a retailer has should have come from a licensed wholesaler only. They can't, there's one exception in statute where they can receive liquor from another retailer that's commonly owned. But other than that, they have to get it from a wholesaler. And when they don't have that, obviously that's considered contraband and is subject to seizure. So that's an opportunity to communicate that to the applicant. All right, 3-tier violations. So these are 2 statutes we're going to go over that are basically the crust of the 3-tier violation prohibition in statute. There's 2 of them, one in 369 and one in 597. Here's the 369 version. So except as otherwise provided in NRS 369.386, 415, 230, 235, and 237, a supplier shall not engage in the business of importing, wholesaling, or retailing alcoholic beverages. So it's pretty explicit. A supplier or manufacturer shall not engage in those activities. Those exceptions are specific exceptions. The first one, 386, has to do with an execution sale. For example, if assets are seized and that those assets are subsequently sold at auction and liquor is a part of that, that's an exception here. 415 has to do with the rectifier license. The rectifier license is a carve-out that's statutorily allowed to operate in more than one tier. They're an importer because they're allowed to import bulk and neutral spirits, and they're also a manufacturer. So that importing, manufacturing, those 2 activities normally exist in 2 different tiers, but because it's statutorily allowed, the rectifier has a carve-out. And then 235 and 237, those have to do with, 230 is the brew pubs, and 235 and 237 are craft distilleries and estate distilleries respectively. The brew pubs and the distilleries are manufacturers, but they're also allowed to serve at retail on site. That constitutes basically a carve-out, statutory carve-out, and they're authorized to do that. Notice in this statute that it says in this state. So this statute is talking about engaging in more than one tier within the state, but the next statute has a little more to say about that. This is the 597, not going to say equivalent because it's different, but it basically speaks on the same thing. I'm going to read it in its entirety. It covers a lot of different areas that are important to discuss. So limitations on engaging in business of importing, wholesaling, or retailing alcoholic beverages. So 1, except as otherwise provided in subsection 2, a person engaged in business as a supplier or engaged in the business of manufacturing, blending, or bottling alcoholic beverages within or without the state That's the key part. This statute contemplates activities within or without the state. So this is the statutory authority that local jurisdictions and the state get to inquire about liquor-related activities outside the state. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. So they shall not, within or without the state, A, engage in the business of importing, wholesaling, or retailing alcoholic beverages. B, operate or otherwise locate his or her business on the premises or property of another person engaged in the business of importing, wholesaling, or retailing alcoholic beverages. We have seen applications where an importer wholesaler is trying to locate their business or obtain a license inside or on the same premises of a manufacturer. This obviously prohibits that. Section 2. This does not, A, preclude a person engaged in the business of importing, wholesaling, or retailing alcoholic beverages from owning less than 2% of the outstanding ownership equity in any organization which manufactures, blends, or bottles alcoholic beverages. So interestingly, there's a carve out for less than 2% ownership. So anybody who's importing, wholesaling, or retailing can own up to 2% of an organization that manufactures, otherwise known as a supplier or manufacturer. So there's a question on the application, on the state application, which asks the applicant, are they engaged in any activities or ownership activities involving any of the different types of liquor business, including wholesaling, retailing, or manufacturing. We also asked them specifically, over and above the application, are they engaging in any of those activities? But just to note that there is, so what we would do if there was an ownership, we'd look at the ownership documents and make sure that it's less than 2%. Otherwise, it would not be allowed. And then B, it does not prohibit a person engaged in the business of rectifying or bottling alcoholic beverages from importing neutral or distilled spirits in bulk, only for the express purpose of rectification. So we talked about the carve out for rectifiers earlier. This is the statute that allows that specifically. Or C, prohibit a person, C through G, from operating a brew pub, instructional winemaking facility, craft distillery, estate distillery, winery, pursuant to the applicable statutes. So all these licensee types involve a form of operating in more than one tier of the 3-tier system. C through G mainly have the retail component that they're allowed. They're all manufacturers, but they're statutorily allowed to engage in retail. Excuse me. All right. So here's some 3-tier violations that we sometimes see. This is not all inclusive. These are just some of the more common ones, or some of the ones that local jurisdictions might run into also. So someone operating as a supplier, manufacturer, while concurrently operating as an importer, wholesaler, or retailer, exceptions exist. We just talked about the exception. So this is just a common one. We picked this one up with that question on the application. If they're engaging in activity, if they state that they're engaging in an activity that involves a tier other than the one that they're licensing, that they're applying for, we ask for documentation to confirm whether or not they're doing that, and then advise them of that's an issue, of whether or not that's an issue. A brew pub applicant who's operating as a liquor wholesaler in this state or another state. We have this occasionally. Sometimes in-state manufacturers would also like to import. Sometimes they'll have a brew pub in another state and they want to import their liquor into the state of Nevada. What they should obtain is a certificate of compliance, but sometimes they'll either not be aware, or they will apply for an importer wholesaler license, even though they're currently a manufacturer in another state. And this would be an example of the 597-210, within or without the state. This would not be allowed due to that statute. We also have a liquor brand owner who outsources production and is applying for an importer wholesaler license. So the brand owner business model is one that's kind of gained a lot of popularity, especially recently. where you don't, usually you'll have like the manufacturer themselves, they'll want to, import their product into Nevada. We also have brand owners who outsource production. Let's say an out-of-state brand owner who outsources production. They're outsourcing production to a distillery in another state, both outside the state. And then we'll see the brand owner applying for an in-state importer wholesaler license so they can import the product that they're outsourcing. But because they're a brand owner and outsourcing production, that brand owner is considered to be operating in the manufacturing tier and hence would be prohibited from obtaining an importer wholesaler license because that would constitute operating in an additional tier. A liquor manufacturer who is applying for an importer wholesaler license. This is another version of the previous one, but this is the actual manufacturer applying for an importer wholesaler license. That would be 2 tiers that they would be operating in and hence would have an issue with compliance with the 3-tier system. Or a wholesaler who manufactures out of state. We see these occasionally. We'll find someone who's wholesaling and we find out that they're manufacturing out of state or they're applying for a wholesaler application, even though they're manufacturing out of state. So there are definitely other versions of this, but different things to look out for. We kind of look through these as we look through the application, see what their business model is, see how their business runs, and also the answers that they put on the application. All right, operating without a state license. Notwithstanding local jurisdiction license approval for in-state suppliers and importer wholesalers, applicants are not authorized to operate until they receive their Nevada state liquor license. We talked about that. If found to be operating prior to receiving their Nevada state liquor license, any liquor product on hand is considered contraband, and the department may require the applicant to immediately send the product back to the shipper or seize it. We talked about that also, pre-license inspections or just inspections in general. It's important that this be communicated to the applicants, as the department frequently runs into applicants who believe they can operate with their local liquor license despite not having been issued their state liquor license. We touched on that previously also. Out-of-state liquor activities. The department has found that asking about out-of-state liquor activities can lead to the discovery of potential 3-tier violations. We talked about a couple just previously. Many applicants disclose their liquor-related activities they intend to engage in Nevada, but unless asked, won't always disclose out-of-state activities. Common scenarios: an out-of-state brand owner operating in the supplier tier who applies for a Nevada importer wholesaler license to import their product. This would constitute a 3-tier violation. We talked about that. We do find that many applicants, they kind of compartmentalize and aren't necessarily aware of the statute that, the statute contemplates liquor activity within or without the state. They really don't have no idea that we will ask about that or that their liquor activity outside the state could affect their application. We have those conversations frequently. So and local jurisdictions may have the same conversations too, but something that's pretty common that we run into. All right, so the state has a new system as of last December. It's called the My Nevada Tax System. On December 9th, 2024, the department implemented a new computer system called My Nevada Tax. For 2025, all liquor license and COC applicants must submit their state applications through My Nevada Tax at nvtax.nv.gov. This includes license and certificate renewals. Certificate meaning certificates of compliance. My Nevada Tax requires applicants, licensees, and certificate holders to create an online account for online application submissions, licensing renewals, filing and paying of liquor tax returns, and other required reporting. This actually goes for all tax types within the department. Applicants can create an account and submit an application at nvtax.nv.gov. This is a great new system that we've implemented where on the liquor side, this is our first renewal period with the My Nevada tax system, constantly looking for ways to improve. But the message to the applicant is that that they will also need to apply through this system. So the way that works is most local jurisdictions, I don't think they have access to the My Nevada tax system, but so they will be receiving paper applications from the applicant. We still need their approved application that usually gets emailed or mailed to us for final review. That can definitely still happen, but the applicant will ultimately need to create an account if they don't have one, and submit their application online. It can be scanned into, so they don't necessarily have to re-enter everything and and result in us having like an electronic and a paper application in the system at the same time. But if any questions pop up regarding this, they can reach out to the department. Our last slide shows the contact information for 2 of our tax examiners who interact daily with the applicants and are the first line with helping applicants with their licensing questions or application questions. I'm also available too when needed, but this is something that all applicants will need to. The licenses are ultimately issued out of the Mint system, so it's definitely a requirement going forward. And we've had real good participation so far. We continue to get the word out, and eventually everyone will be on board with this. All right, there were some legislative bills passed this last session that do involve liquor. The department will be providing updates on the following bills at a future date. We had AB 404, which touched on brew pubs, electronic fund transfers, EFTs between retailers and wholesalers, and liquor license suspensions and revocations. We also had AB 375 that touched on liquor deliveries for food establishments serving liquor, the state drink and craft distilleries, and SB 439 touched on estate distilleries. So in summary, we covered a lot of ground, short period. We have the 3-tier system in the liquor industry: suppliers, manufacturers, importer wholesalers, also known as distributors, and retailers. All liquor businesses requires licensing per 369-180 and 369-430, also 597. Certificate of compliance application process. Again, the certificates of compliance are for out-of-state manufacturers, and the department handles those applications and licensing. And of course, the in-state license review process. One of the main things, in addition to the 3-tier system, is making sure that the applicants are in compliance with the department. They don't have any liabilities with the department. License type retail stores, again, those are governed by the local jurisdiction. Licenses are issued by local jurisdiction. However, those licensees are still subject to complying with NRS 369 and 597. The 2 3-tier prohibition statutes, again, are NRS 369 382 and NRS 597 210. We talked about both of those in detail. Operating without a state license, definite no-no. That shouldn't be done before, during, or after obtaining a license. They can operate once they've licensed, but if their license lapses, they shouldn't be operating. But more importantly, more relevantly, we're talking about before they obtain their license. Many times during the point where they get their local jurisdiction license but don't yet have the state license, want to make sure they get that state license before they operate. And then out-of-state liquor activities, that's an area, it should be an area of interest to both the state and local jurisdictions with regard to detecting potential 3-tier violations, knowing what their out-of-state activities, liquor activities may be, if they have any, can bring some things to light that might need to be addressed. And if they can be addressed, may prevent a license denial if they can make some adjustments depending on the situation. And as mentioned, for 2025, all liquor license and certificate of compliance applicants must submit their state applications through My Nevada Tax, mynvtax.nv.gov. This includes license and renewal certificates. So I did mention, this kind of reminded me of something. I did mention, the fact that from the local jurisdiction, we do accept and rely upon their emailing the approval of the application, but the system is set up for the applicant to apply directly within the system. They're going to be directed to that as the proper way to obtain their license. So other than that, our contacts are myself. My email address is up there. Our chief investigator, Eugene Cataldi, he oversees the investigators who do the inspections, including the pre-license inspection. And then our liquor tax examiners, Monica Fitzgerald and Shelley Johnson. They're the ones that are usually working directly with the applicants. But if there are any questions, any of us can be contacted, and we're happy to help communicate on applications, work together. Please don't hesitate. We just want to make the application process as efficient and effective as possible, help the applicants get their license, whatever they're applying for, as soon as possible with as easy as possible, all doing so while following the statutes and cooperating together. So that's what we're looking forward to doing. And with that, just want to open it up to any questions. I'm here to help out with any questions. Thanks. Also, if you'd like to type in any questions, feel free to do so. We'll read those off and get those answered to you. Thank you. Absolutely. We'll be happy to email the PowerPoint. If you'd like to give us your email coordinates, we'll be happy to send that out. Okay, not seeing any further questions popping up. Again, this is more of an introduction. A lot of our staff have contacts at many of the local jurisdictions, but feel free to reach out. If nothing else, to make contact. Feel free to reach out if there are any questions regarding applications or the application process. We will do the same, and we look forward to working with you guys going forward. Thank you.